So thank you, Josh. Thank you to the Workshop Academy for throwing this together and giving me an opportunity to organize thought. Organizing thought's a really good idea. Those of you who've thought of teaching in the past, I don't think you should turn that kind of an opportunity down, because it'll give you a chance to kind of take all those thoughts and feelings you have and put them into an outline and see how much there is there. And thanks to all of you, taking the time out of your weekend, struggling here with our little technical snafus. Some of you getting up very, very early in the morning or staying up very, very late at night. I'm thrilled to know so many of you guys from all around the world, and it's great to be able to meet, albeit in this kind of one-sided manner. By and by, we will meet in the flesh. We will shake hands and break bread and all that good stuff. At the end of this thing, we're going to have a Q&A, time permitting. But the message I'm bringing you, I believe, is so simple that if I've relayed and demonstrated it properly, there may not be a need for one. I've been told that my talks, while very info-heavy, are demonstration light. So I'll try to say the latter half for that. These talks, when they're nice and short, you can actually get more done. It's kind of it's a more compressed period of time, and get in, get out, say what needs to be said. So in that spirit, quick intro: Paul Richards, concept artist, Epic Games. I don't like it when artists talk too much about themselves in these things. This interview format where you kind of get to know each other. You can never have my history, and I can never have yours. So let's just crack on with all this stuff, because it's all about what we can use, the data that's going to be of use to us as working artists, as so many of you are. All right. I am a guy who has always struggled with super simple things. Not the hard stuff, but the super obvious stuff. In fact, with much water under the bridge, I now believe that the super obvious stuff is, in fact, the hard stuff, and has been all along. I get so stumped, even now with my 20 plus years of industry experience. What do I include? What do I not include? Why doesn't this feel like enough? Is this too much? There's just options. And those of you familiar with my output know that I've spent a lot of my career more or less blurting out words like girl or mech or demon or pumpkin. So I decided it was high time, now that we're here in quarantine with nothing but time on our hands, to start to make sentences with those words, to seek a higher level of expression. So this series, entitled Creative Trickery Part 1, is based on the idea that art is a trick that you play on yourself first. My original tagline for this series, as some of you may remember, was, if you can change the way you think, you can change the way you draw. That was super catchy, but then later the Etherington brothers came out with their How to Think When You Draw web series, and it was too similar, so I had to change it. But I still like the idea that we, the creators, are the first people that our illustrations have to work on. We have to trick ourselves first. So these lectures are meant to offer sort of spells that we can cast on ourselves, mental tweaks that we can perform to coax different results from ourselves, kind of break away from formula. I don't want to get bored with myself. It's quarantine, I'll go crazy. So what I want is, as an artist, to, at will, shift my goals and my criteria, giving myself new ways to move mentally. This means determining what moves are legal, what moves are illegal, or that is to say, what I'm responsible for at the time. So today, I'd like to give you something hopefully new to be responsible for, something that I hope will give you a more involving experience and allow you to really live in your images, which is where true creativity, I think, takes place. Creative people aren't always the most rational people. They have really great imaginations that make really, really bizarre associations. They have a lot of complete misses, but they also have a lot of near hits. The work is good sometimes, but it's missing something. So what if I told you that you might be just one element or two away from something really great? With that, I'll switch over to my screen. Hopefully you guys can all see what's on my monitor. Are you seeing a package of Jelly Belly jelly beans? Someone give me a quick yes or no.
Yes, I see it.
Thank you. So to those of you familiar with Jelly Belly jelly beans, you'll know that they come in a dazzling array of flavors, some of which are pretty disgusting. I've compiled a list of the most disgusting Jelly Belly names, which are as follows: black pepper, booger, dirt, earthworm, earwax, rotten egg, sausage, soap, vomit, stinky socks, lawn clippings, and toothpaste. So those of you who have had an experience eating the Jelly Belly jelly beans know that these very widely fluctuating, illogical, random combinations taste horrible. They're actually designed to taste horrible, but in combination, they probably taste even worse. I'm not sure how many of you caught Tom Skoll's workshop several moons ago about tasting your work. He likes to bring up the idea that you want to taste your work. I like that idea, and I think that slots into that. This idea that when we're confronted with such odd choices, we can't help but ask ourselves, why on earth does this exist? What is its reason for being? This crazy combination that I have in my mouth that tastes so odd. The French have a word for this called raison d'etre, or raison d'etre. I'm not 100% on the pronunciation there. Sorry, France. But it's a thing's reason for being. It's the reason that it's here on Earth, and the reason that we're putting it in our mouth, essentially. I find a lot of common threads, common denominators to the art I like. And one thing that tastes good to a lot of people is variety, which I condense to this phrase: a lot of shit going on. I found that as I'm looking through art that I like, this lot of shit going on variety thing is something that I see cropping up again and again. After this presentation is over, or if this video is ever posted, I'll make sure to credit the individual artists and let you know who I'm looking at here. But this is an example of a lot of shit going on. You can see that this is a very robust domestic scene, with lots of objects strewn all over the place, and just because of how much is there, one could posit a guess that all that they needed to do to create a picture that was incredibly compelling and beautiful was to throw as much as they possibly can on the screen. And as it happens, I really like this example. But, what I found, the missing link in this equation is that what I really respond to is a lot of related shit going on. That was the thing that I was missing. And once I started to put that piece in the puzzle, I started to notice, there's this artist that I found out about only recently. I can't believe he was off my radar, named Tim McBurney. And you can see that this isn't just a random hodgepodge of objects, people, places, and things. They're all kind of hewn together. We have this central figure that's on their way to, meet this kind of cluster of people. We have, shepherds and hunters, and this guy possibly standing guard. So there's a lot to this idea of having things be related. Now, some of you, I'm guessing, are quite visionary, idea-driven artists. You guys journal and you use a lot of precognition. The images are formed in your minds before you put pen to parchment. Bravo to you. But the method I'm going to propose to you guys today is for the rest of us chaos artists who operate more from whimsy than will, and whose logic centers are, shall we say, still in early development. We want to go from isolated, impoverished, random ideas, which create confusion, boredom, and detachment, to related, enriched, specific ideas, which engage. So in that spirit, I present to you the concept of today's talk, the meal. So this was a device that I came up with a little while ago that I've been beta testing, but I wanted to share with you today that I believe will help you in trying to kind of compile responsibilities as you kind of work your way through a piece. Now, if you look at any plate of food, you'll see, usually if it's a, kind of a gourmet experience, kind of a presentation on the plate. And that's the first thing that a meal is served on, some kind of plate, which, it's like, the framing device or whatever. You have the main, which is the primary food source, the meat, sorry, vegetarians, but the place where the highest amount of value is. You have the side dish, which is most often literally off to the side. And then you have garnish. You have little things drizzled and sprinkled around the plate. I had pulled up an example, which is probably pretty far out, zoomed out rather to see, but I've kind of isolated where all these things appear. The reason for this meal analogy that I'm going to be talking about today isn't arbitrary. It's meaningful because I don't know about you guys, but during this quarantine, I've been doing a lot of kind of snacking here and there. Like I'll go and I'll get myself some chips and salsa, and that'll be my whole dinner. Or open up a can of nuts, or just like little things, little nibbles here and there, and it's not substantial, and it doesn't fill me up, and it's the opposite of a meal. It's kind of like what I've been doing almost my whole career. Huge sheets of candlesticks, or huge sheets of one door, or huge sheets of one character. By contrast, a meal, I think, is nourishing. It does fill you up. It does give you vitamins and energy. It nourishes your spirit. And then, on top of that, you get all that good stuff. You get that variety of textures, mouthfeel. You get the soft with the crunchy. You get the savory with the sweet. It's not just a bunch of empty calories. All those foods work really well together. They were chosen by somebody who knows what food science means. They know what's acidic and what's a base, and they can prepare a meal for you that's going to just be just right. So I have deeper definitions of what I feel all these plate, main, side, garnish is, but I feel like that concept is already playing. Garnish tends to be little small things, but it doesn't have to be. I often think of particle effects. Those of you guys who work in games and film are kind of like garnish on top of a piece, those little sparkles or droplets, or, bits of wind-blown leaves, or, just energy, text elements and things like that can be garnish. But I wanted to switch now to some examples from my own personal life. So this would be, hopefully you can all see my Photoshop screen, an example of kind of a snack food that I've made. But you can see as I pan across it that with the addition of one other element, in this case a delightful sandwich on a string, that something is now starting to happen, that there is a relationship created between the little monster and the little sandwich. And his raison d'etre is now to eat this sandwich. He's got a reason to be on my page. And the sandwich has a reason to be on the page. It's to be eaten by him. You might notice this little garnish coming off here. It's not quite a complete meal, though. Here are some hamburgers that I drew. This is kind of like a typical page for me, right? You've seen this kind of stuff for me before if you follow my stuff. Just like iterations, right? The concept art, bread and butter. Number them from 1 to 12, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Show them to your boss, have them pick. This is our lives. It doesn't have to be, though. We don't have to settle for a snack. We can have a whole meal. So here's the whole meal. Look at that Happy Meal. That's literally a Happy Meal, you know, minus the prize and the little toy that comes with it. I've added a plate on. You can see that the hamburger is now happy with the drink. Oh, it's very American, by the way, all of you guys who are tuning in from. This is what Americans think are meals. The rest of you and the rest of the world eat real food. Congratulations. You're going to outlive all of us. I've got some ketchup packets here on the side, little bits of garnish. You know, the fries are kind of the side, and the drink is kind of a side. You've got sweet in the form of the cola. You've got savory in the form of the burger. I put a little olive there. It's a nice little form of decoration I'm sure you've all seen. But the game can get even deeper, for as you see, the scene can be expanded. We can have a plate on a plate, so to speak. Suddenly we have a wider context. We have this guy here who is the recipient of this meal. We have the giver of the meal, and we have what looks like could be the inside of a McDonald's style place with little kids outside high off their asses on soda, having a great time. So this is a festive little scene, and we got there from here, expanding outward logically based on what kind of needed to be there based on this meal principle. I rather think that this table that he's sitting on and this background that he's on is kind of like a plate, or you can consider, you know, the window a plate, and these little guys here are kind of like garnish on the page. They kind of come up from his face and kind of wrap around and go back in. There's kind of a distance here created between the meal and him. He really wants it, and this person wants to give it to him. So that I think is interesting. So I wanted to, we're sitting at about halfway through here. I have lots of examples for you on how I've been working with this exercise throughout the week. I have lots of little scenes that I've made trying to employ this principle. Little silly, stupid drawings that aren't very professional, but that where I started from a point. In this case, I probably started with him, and he became my main. But the thing is, where you start in a picture doesn't have to become your main. It can be really anything. We're going to do a demonstration of what I mean later. But here you can kind of see that, you know, there's little elements sprinkled around here that kind of make sense for where he is. I started off by giving him an ice cream cone that he seems very happy with. But, you know, that ice cream cone had to come from somewhere. Everything, I think you'll find, has a destination and an origin. Everything is going to someplace and coming from someplace. So in this case, the ice cream blorb subject came from this guy here, who was very happy to sell it to him. And he has things around the scene that you might recognize from a food truck, napkins, utensils, and whatnot. You know, stuff scattered on the ground. This fellow here, who looks like he's going to be stoked to have one of those himself, or is jealous. Then you have people passing by in a big crowd, which, by the way, felt really weird to draw during quarantine since we're not seeing crowds so often anymore. But so, you know, get a little context, get a little bit of main, a little bit of side, a little bit of garnish, all served up on a plate. Are you guys with me so far? Well, sometimes I'll get kind of a generic idea where there's people that, it looks like there's people heading towards this little sewer grate here that this guy's entering into. I might have started with this guy here and thought, well, you know, what's he looking at down here? And from there traveled here. But that idea begat a little bit bigger idea, because I was like, this drainage ditch to wherever isn't really what I would call a game-changing plate. It doesn't set a context that's very epic. So I was just like, well, what if it's like a Indiana Jones style temple, right? It's the same idea, the same you know, main side plate garnish, but instead of going into a little drainage dish, she's going into a big mouth. I've got quite a few of these. I often start off in a place really illogical, right? Here's a stupid kid trying to get a piece of toast out of a toaster that's facing the exact opposite wrong way, with things not where he could reach them. This is the kind of illogical choice that I find myself making all the time. But if I simply kick into that logical mode where I start to think, okay, I have my main, and he's interacting with this toaster, you know, where is he logically? I can place other people in the scene as kind of garnish. I can place other, you know, sides. I can put him up on a little stool because he's short. You know, these are the kind of decisions that I might not reach if I was just trying to solve for the child, or just trying to solve for the toaster, or just trying to solve for the cupboard. Here is a feisty snake on his way to try to capture a timid mouse who's hiding behind a bowl of something in the middle of a crowded market. In this case, the snake came first, and I was just like, well, why does the snake exist? He came from this basket. That's where he was from. But, you know, maybe he wants a food source. Maybe this mouse was here at this food source eating off of that, and this guy wants to eat off of him. Some of these get pretty weird and aren't really that legible. This was a guy that it was just random, but I started putting presents around him. I started framing him with these presents, and I started to try to experiment with the idea of giving him a big cake. And so he's some kind of deranged mutant birthday boy. Some of these don't play as well, but some of them I think kind of do. Like here's a funky little explorer who's got some little tchotchke that's like his lantern, right? He's framed by these coffins. This is kind of like the plate, and then he's got the lady that's kind of following behind, who's sort of like not sure of things. It has a destination somewhere over here and an origin somewhere over here. These drawings were all done trying to keep kind of a meal in mind. Oh, here I have kind of a character. It probably started with this guy. It probably started with this car. And, you know, it didn't feel nourishing enough to have it just be a car. So I put a little dude coming out of there. And I had him looking off in this direction. And looks, by the way, set a lot of things up. An emotion sets something up. Looks are kind of like invisible lines in your pieces. So from there, I had to give him something to look at. I had to give him a raison d'etre. So this car pulled off to the side of the road. It was kind of an interesting little scene. You know, the plate is there, you know, a little bit of garnish, a side post. It felt more dramatic if I made this nondescript animal here some sort of fugitive, some sort of alien running from the law. And this casual vehicle up here, some kind of, I don't know, paramilitary vehicle with people with guns getting out to search for this, you know, poor little alien guy. You know, while I was there, I was adding little bits of garnish. This plant is kind of like, not really necessary, but it sort of helps kind of flesh the thing out. It gives it some kind of context beyond, oh, because I had a tree here, a little bit of plant next to that wouldn't hurt. Of course, I'll get to some of these. My friend Popkins, Artur, who may be on the chat, made this wonderful piece that I like to kind of reference, where he used a big pair of lips as the plate that this kind of main dish is sitting on. And there you can see lots of little bits of garnish, and you can see saliva and, you know, like little hairs on the upper lip. There's no reason that your plate has to be a literal location. It can be some kind of, I don't know, large inflated framing device. There's so many pieces of art that I think are really good for this. Here's one I found just this week of somebody who is using technological equipment as a framing device. Very clever. Let's see. This person used a gigantic robot arm as a plate, you know. This whole piece is served up on that thing. I have many, many more examples, but switching back to my file. I can't go through all this, but this was just a fun exercise that I wanted to try out this week. Here, I made this one because one of our cats was sitting down sleeping, and I just wanted to draw it very quickly. But you know, my living room doesn't look like this. I made the sleeping cat as kind of like the main, but the real action is revolving around these little side dish guys, these little mice that are look like they're harvesting pieces of food from a tabletop. And I mean for these things around the perimeter to eventually be mousetraps, to kind of sort of like up the stakes, right? So nobody understood this idea of stakes better than Frank Frazetta, right? So here you have like, if this is a plate, right, you've got this wonderful snowy scene that it's all set against. You have your main here, which is kind of like this lady. And you've got the sides. You've got these aggressors. So there's a cause-effect relationship set up between the two of them. These guys want to eat them. She wants to get away from these guys. And the stakes are increased by the fact that she has a child to protect. Notice that she's put the child first, which seems like a bad mothering move on her behalf. But cause and effect are big logic things that we can think about and factor in heavily into sort of like how we can compose a piece. I'm trying to think of where else I've done kind of cause and effect. Here we have a mama bird who's feeding a little baby bird a worm with kind of a simple plate backdrop. It's kind of got garnish in the form of a nest. You could call the nest the plate if you really wanted to. Some weirder ideas as I had them. This one started off as these like cat vampire people with farting powers fighting each other in outer space. And they're being observed by the god Craptaculus, who has a phalanx of plungers. This all grew. Yes.
How do you come up with these ideas? Are you just kind of like drawing freehand and then coming up with it as you go?
Yeah, this is kind of like, I'm just riffing right now. I want to do it real time during the latter portion of this. I want to take you through the process. In fact, fuck it, we can probably get at that right now, because it's one thing to have you, because I can tell when something's kind of impoverished though. Like I have a few here. Like this is a pirate with his little skeleton buddies on the bow of some boat getting treasure. But you notice there's this big question mark. I've left this big open area where he's looking off somewhere, but the piece feels incomplete and snack-like because we don't see what he's looking at. So there's an impoverished feeling that you get from a piece like that. This piece, this is just like a Gandalf, just like a generic Gandalf that I drew, right? Because I think I was trying to do something kind of compositionally funky with these things. But like, that's so generic, and it's like, that's just such a regular ass Gandalf that I was just like, I want to draw a Gandalf. I want that to be the main. But, that's interesting. I got like these centurion looking dudes in the back, which could, be from Tolkien lore, but they kind of struck me as like Roman soldiers. So I was thinking like, well, what if I made like this time traveling wizard? What if this was a wizard that traveled through time? And using the meal idea, came up with a kind of a more badass idea that I would be more stoked about actually working on. So this time traveling wizard would ride on the back of a T-Rex through time with a magical wand made of clocks, because that's a representative of time. He would have some kind of cool NES style time traveling gauntlet. And maybe in the back, I drew some kind of like, as a plate, some, Easter Island big heads, a pharaoh, maybe like a samurai, stuff to kind of like show that he is a time traveling wizard. I fulfilled the meal, and I was just like, yep, that's cool. I've got enough to go off of. That other version, not quite enough. Super snacky. Not there yet. As I can now get into the demonstration portion of this.
Oh wow, this is great. I really like this one.
Yeah. So here I think I've got all these named. This one's just called Big Ass Flower. So this would be an example. This would be an example of like you have the main of the piece, which is the flower. And now this could have just been a regular sized prize flower, but I think the big flower is deserving of the first medal prize. The first medal is kind of a supporting bit of garnish. The watering can is there because this gardener is, very, very proud of their award-winning flower. In fact, here are the awards here in the background. Nice little bit of supporting garnish, don't you think? I drew this one really quickly, which was just a simple interaction between some kind of King Kong-y kind of character and some little microscopic lady set against a jungle. None too impressive, but there's kind of enough there that we're starting to see a moment. Here's a picture of the traveling stick salesman that some of you guys have seen on many a concept art painting, spanning the desert. I think I drew this pig thing first and then kind of expanded it to kind of showcase that. These pyramid things I thought made a pretty interesting plate. This one, it's the idea is like there's like a little girl that's shooing evil banshee spirits from her house. The plate here, by the way, is her house. Here we have some people taking down a gigantic bear thing. You can kind of see that this is kind of garnish light. I'd have to think more about this location, put little lanterns in there or something to kind of flesh that out. Another kind of garnish light thing, these gigantic lizards and sort of a nondescript cowboy. It's not really certain if the cowboy is trying to kind of like just look at him or hunt him or who knows. Here's a frog soliciting another frog on a log. Again, kind of like middle of the road, not really like a big game-changing statement. This I thought was kind of fun. It's just like Death being given this like birthday cake for their, I don't know how many years of life this is. Once I had a party scenario, it was pretty easy to add this plate of this banner and all these other deaths around, super stoked to be celebrating his birthday. So with that, I can try to take us through in real time one of these little things to kind of demonstrate the meal in real time. Now, this is normally where I would take suggestions from the audience, but I found that goes really terribly. So I'm going to just I'm just going to start with something kind of generic, right? I
remember I went to the Dallas workshop and you did that. You took
yeah. Oh, it's a horrible idea. I've seen so many artists do that, and they wind up with the weirdest, most unmanageable subject matter. So I'm just going to start with an emotion because that's, to me it's easier. I'll do something. It's easier to, you find out what kind of a person you are, but by the kind of emotions you put on people's faces. How gruff you are, how happy you are. So this is kind of a little impish character that couldn't be more happy about something. So now that we've set up this expression, I think that we have a main here. This could be our main, but it doesn't have to be. But there has to be something here in front of his face that's attracting so much attention. This is kind of a devilish grin. So I kind of feel like that he should be performing some kind of prank, that the side dish should be somebody perhaps in the foreground, leaning over precariously, possibly with their pants pulled down slightly and a little bit of their butt crack exposed. And this guy here is about to stick a lit stick of dynamite into it. Pretend that this is an awesome lit stick of dynamite. He's a trickster. He's a prankster. Look out. So now we have main and we have side. We don't have plate yet. Now, is this going to be another one of these little imp demon guys, or is this going to be like a regular dude like you and me? These are the questions that we can ask ourselves. It's kind of game changing if it's something really different, I think. I'm just going to scale this image up really big. Maybe put it in front of him a little bit to really show that this is pretty far ahead. Now, this isn't just a person that's leaning over for no reason. We have to give them a raison d'etre. So when I'm leaning over, it's usually to pick something up that I've dropped on the ground, or it's because I'm trying to perform some kind of complicated action. Maybe I'm withdrawing money from an ATM. Maybe I'm in the garden rooting up potatoes. Maybe I'm at some kind of, I don't know. What could this person be doing? You know what? We'll get back to that, because the beauty of the meal is that it can be solved non-linearly, folks. The rest of you who have wonderful minds that work logically and linearly will be able to come up with these ideas right from the get-go. But, I think it's just kind of fun to just kind of live in the image for a while. Because he's a devil, he's got a tail. Oh, and here's a tip, you guys. This is very useful. Sides often come in numbers of more than one. If you do something once, it's a coincidence. But I find that if you do it 3 times, it looks intentional. No matter how stupid what you've done is, if you draw it enough times, it'll look like you had meant to do that. So I'm going to draw a bunch of his little imp friends back here, also laughing their asses off. They're about to watch something go down. And that makes me think, okay, where is all this going down? Are they in hell? Or are these imps, did they summon a portal to hell? Or from hell? Let's give them a little portal back here. It's kind of a nice little stage for imps to be on. Pretend this is a pentagram. It would be the other way, but I don't want to flip the canvas. It's a pain in the ass. You get it. So this is a portal to hell, where all the little demons have come from to play this prank on this poor, unsuspecting grandma. Poor grandma. Grandpa. Let's not be mean to grandma. Grandma just doesn't deserve that. But grandpa, he's done some horrible things in his life. Grandpa's just, you wouldn't read the paper in this position, so grandpa needs something to do. Grandpa is just kind of in a weird straddling position, which doesn't really befit grandpa. But again, we can come back to it. So far we have this nice looking plate here. There's this little tongue sticking out. Imps have little bifurcated tongues, by the way. If you've seen one, you know. And they tickle when they put them in your ear. He's bending down to pick up the paper, because old people still read papers. Let's shrink all this down. Give ourselves a little bit more room for that to play. It's kind of linear, right? Kind of to this. No, if you're an old man picking up a paper, your head isn't really up in this position. It's more down. So nobody looks up while they stoop down to reach a paper. This is the paper. Pretend it's awesome. Checking time real quick. Looks like we've got about 15 minutes remaining. What a time crunch.
We can go over a little bit since the technical problems.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't really have anything else to do, so this can go as long as you want it to.
Me either.
No, that is to say, we're both very important people. We've got a lot on our agendas. Very important professionals. Please hire us in the future because we're very important.
Yeah.
That's not how you pick up a paper, but maybe he's picking shit up off his lawn. I said I wouldn't curse in this, and I've done it so many times. Some dog has done his business. Again, all over the place. That's good garnish. Little turds everywhere. Oh man, just a travesty. He's out there picking him up with a shovel or spoon or something. It seems like these guys would have something to do with that, though. It seems like that's kind of too coincidental. These guys have staged this in some way. I mean, it could be their poop. What have we not focused on so far? We have this. If it's really a lawn, we're going to need lawn stuff, right? We're going to need garnish. We'll need pieces of grass, flowers. Looks like he's doing exercises now. Maybe it should be grandma. Let's not get married to things. Grandma's got some miles on her. Grandma definitely wouldn't be done in this position. She's pissed because this is not an easy position for her to hold. Well, logically, if you want to bend over to get something, Grandma would never stand that far up. She'd get down on all fours. Grandma's used to that. She could be weeding a garden, right? I don't know why Grandma's butt cheeks are sticking out, but just let's roll with it. She's got a trowel maybe in one hand. Maybe let's make her unsuspecting. So this is no longer something that's bad that's happening to Grandma. Grandma doesn't know that this is coming. Grandma never knows. She's whistling. She's got her little radio out. Their favorite old-timey songs. There's an antenna. There's a speaker. These are where, sometimes you have to eat vegetables. Oh, this is something I could talk about. Sometimes you have to look up references to, because they're really going to enrich your piece and ground it. And they're super good for you. But man, do you not want to eat them. Boy, I really hate looking at reference. Gosh, I hate reference so much. That looks like a good enough radio. I like to see how far I can get these things. She's got a carrot. Causal. Because of this, that. Because garden, carrot. Do it once, it's a coincidence. Do it a bunch of times, it's intentional. Line of carrots. Hell, give her another line of carrots. And in those gardens, there's those little signs of what's what. That could be there too. We could expand the scene outward. Grandma's got a necklace. Grandma's whistling, so she's kind of doing that. This takes place in some kind of neighborhood, so this is either a full-on garden, which we can indicate with leaves at the periphery. It's pretty good to have big leaves in a place that's supposed to be a garden. And back here, maybe we could put some neighborhood stuff. But it's kind of a lot, right? It's kind of like based on one little idea seed of this mischievous, little guy. One thing gives rise to another, gives rise to another. We have a main. We have a side, depending upon how you look at it. There's motive. This guy is kind of going after that. His little friends are there cackling away, kind of raises the stakes. She's about to get humiliated. And we have all this wonderful garnish spread around, all these nice little things that are going to fill that painting out and give us, a real good reason to keep going on this thing. It'll give us a lot of things that we can kind of ping pong back and forth between. Because you saw me going, I didn't know what I was doing half the time, and honestly, I still don't. That's the big secret. A lot of us are making this stuff up as we go. But this piece might beget some more interesting piece later. This idea seed, this idea armature may be of use to us in the future. I'll intersplice with an anecdote. So I was at Blizzard for a little while, and my friends on the Diablo team had this drawing group where they were trying to combine random subject matter every time. So they would meet, and the subject would be donkey car wash with bonus toaster, and they would try to take that subject matter and put it all into a picture. And sometimes they had a real good time, and they made some real kind of goofy looking pictures, but at some level, I feel like they failed to satisfy because the elements are just so discordant that you could never really quite tell, what was happening or why the piece even existed. It's been really easy for me for years to just kind of scrape by doing little bits here and there. Like some artists I really like kind of specialize in doing images that are kind of Daffy. Here's Katsuya Terada, who's, he's in my top 5 favorites. And if you try to decipher what's going on here, it's really hard. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of shit going on, but they're not really related. And I'm not calling him out. I think he's great. I've seen him live draw a bunch of times. I own all of his books. But now I'll look at pieces like this and I'll think like, oh, this is neat. Look, this little girl is kind of like surrounded by these crazy shark guys. And this guy here is in some kind of special suit. And it looks like she's controlling the sharks. They have a relationship, she's like shark girl. This is a picture from The Lord of the Rings, Here we have mane. Here we have plate. Here we have side. And all this wonderful garnish that supports these details. Mushroom is there because this is a wooded thing. We've got these wonderful woolly trees of the Middle-earth countryside. This was a cool piece I found earlier in the week. This isn't just a lot of shit going on. This is a lot of related shit going on. This is a tavern where lots of weird Rasputin-y, Hellboy-y kind of things are going on. Wonderful. But the only thing you could say is that there's really no clear main here. Everybody's kind of like a side. That could be remedied. This is a piece by Mindy Lee, who's been having a really great mermaid. Obvious main here. Side dish as these floating bodies. Bits of debris as both garnish and stage. The blood red ocean all around her as the plate. Here's a piece by a fellow I know on Facebook who did this wonderful painting based on his son's little drawing of a teddy bear. Now, imagine if he had just kept it to the bear, that the bear has this wonderful side dish, this heart that's hovering out of its chest cavity, all this like secondary interest, the little bits of, space garnish, comets floating around, all these wonderful little micro murals happening here, are really a feast for the eyes. In fact, I have a piece that I've been working on that employs the meal, which I'm a little embarrassed to show you because it's a little bit early on. I say this, but I've been working on it for weeks. It's kind of like it's an angel on the toilet who's like pooping lightning. And around it, like she's the main, right? She's the main dish. And these cherubs, these little secondary guys, they're like the side dish. This one here is taking a picture. This one here is flushing. And this one down here is kind of like cause and effect wise getting zapped by the lightning. So I've got this all planned out. I have to finish the darn thing now, but there's a lot of other kind of causal relationships happening in here. Her stiletto heels are kind of glowing blue because, there's this underlight from the lightning. At least that's the idea I'm trying to get across. Because it's a toilet, there's little supporting garnish like this plunger, Even the little cherubs have kind of supporting garnish in the form of those hearts that you often see with them. They've got their halos. She's got a little garnish in the form of a tattoo that's going to be on her arm. I've tastefully reined in the nudity. I hope everybody appreciates the restraint that I've exercised here and trying to maintain the spotless representation of the Workshop Academy. But
this is not too bad.
Okay, good. Yeah, I braced Josh for this in the beginning. I'd like to go back from this presentation to the main screen without quitting out of this. Oh, you are screen sharing. Stop share. All right. So now you see my face again, right? So
yeah,
great. So to sum up, I kind of feel like detail is the thing that a lot of people kind of are striving for a lot. And detail is, it's sometimes meant to compensate for the lack of pictorial substance. It's easy to decorate and sort of endlessly subdivide something to give it that interest. But true interest comes from the contextual, I think you'll find. And detail really ought to enrich meaning. And for this, we can't purely rely on happenstance as much as I want to. We need logic. And when we employ that logic and where it is, it can still be pretty freeform, as I hope you've seen. The great jazz musician Miles Davis had this quote, which I want to recite to you now, which is, it's not the note that you play that's the wrong note. It's the note that you play afterwards that makes it right or wrong. In other words, you can put almost anything you want down, like that little imp or whatever, any mark, any pictorial element, so long as you follow it up with the appropriate supporting mark or pictorial element. And that justifies it. It gives it that raison d'etre. I feel sometimes that art can be almost too free. There's too many options. And the remedy there is to replace all those options with responsibilities. You are less likely to question a responsibility. You just do it. And that's that. There's no gray area. You're responsible for feeding yourself and others. So, this week when you're all kind of off and doing your thing, ask yourself, per the situation, what am I responsible for? Am I going to make a snack, or am I going to prepare that sumptuous meal? And what I want for me right now in my artistic development is to get to this point where it's just normal to prepare meals, where anything less feels like weird, like impoverished, unfinished business. Now, with a meal, I believe you attain a higher level of conceptual completion. What you've made meets nutritional requirements. It contains essential ingredients. And so if you've been following along, this is kind of a stealth talk that's revolving around composition and narrative. So in a sense, I kind of tricked us all into kind of what we were really dealing with. Because in order to compose, we need things to compose with. Not random things, but related things. And that's super obvious, but at the same time, not super obvious. For some of you, what we've discussed today comes really naturally. Your brains already work like this, but reason still abandons the best of us on occasion. Common sense, as I like to say, isn't common sense. And with that, I guess we can hand ourselves over to Q&A with what remaining time we have.
Okay, awesome. So with the Q&A, you guys can enable your mic. All you gotta do is click on the mic on your name and then unmute, and then you can speak, or you can just ask in the chat room. So I'll leave it. I'll wait a little bit to see.
Okay. Yeah. If you want to MC, that'd be great, because what I'll do is I'll try to kind of like draw along with.
Okay. Yeah. You can keep drawing while they ask questions. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to be able to kind of like draw in response to what people are saying, but I should ask, has this message of the meal been, a waste of time, or has it been all revelatory? Because to me, it's game changing. Because I don't think of all this stuff. I can't cook it all up on the spot. And I like that limited amount of things, and I like to be able to assign those names to them. I can keep random.
Okay, so here's a question. What is a line between a snack and a meal? Is it gray and blurry, or pretty defined?
Well, I don't know.
By Wesley.
Yeah, anything can almost be anything, right? So, sometimes it depends upon scale. If we draw a piece of chicken here, here's a piece of chicken. Again, sorry, vegetarians and vegans, but I love chicken. But the difference between a meal and a snack, like the importance of an object, I find depends upon kind of its like its vivacious quality. It becomes more prominent when you make it bigger, almost. Like there's an art center expression that somebody told me, which was, if you can't make it good, make it big. I think that's kind of funny. But as soon as you get kind of a human entity into the scene, our eyes want to equate this with the main and this with the side. So if you take either of those elements by themselves, it's really just a snack. And this is becoming a little bit closer to a meal. I mean, obviously, you can do other things that upstage that. So this is our dynamic now. But as soon as we add, a hungry monster in the back, and this is just some kind of like trap that's been set down to like lure in the monster, then the whole dichotomy changes. Grr. So what used to be our meal is kind of now our snack. So do you see how it's kind of situationally dependent? I hope that's a satisfactory pictorial answer to your question.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Here's another question. I have a question about how to approach posing. I have a lot of problems with that. How to make it look interesting.
Oh my gosh, that's so open-ended.
If you could just do like a quick,
Well,
answer.
if you've been following along, you know that that poses. How many of us have been to figure drawing and seen one of these? La-di-da! It's like the balletic kind of like nothing pose, or like the yoga pose, right? The moment of quiet contemplation, select. Woe is me. But even that is something better than the yoga pose, which is just nothing. So as soon as you have this, as soon as you have an emotion, sadness, things need to have that raison d'etre. They need to have that reason for being. So this person, to justify this pose, is looking into a reflecting pool and seeing their ugly ass reflection. They'll never be pretty. And they're crying, and their tears are falling into the water. A pose that has meaning, a good pose is a pose that, they're on their way somewhere. They're going to somewhere. There's a little bit of cause and effect going on. So this person, we could draw on another person in the scene who's like, hey, buddy, what's going wrong? Tapping him on the shoulder. I don't think that you're ugly. You'll always be pretty to me. Or like, hey man, I need to use the reflecting pool after you, depending upon what their emotion is. These are great professional level drawings, aren't they? Aren't you impressed by my draftsmanship? But I hope that answers your question in terms of like, if you can give the pose a justification, if you can give it a reason for being there, if you can link it up with something else in the picture and create that related thing, because it's easy to draw a lot of shit going on, but a lot of related shit, not so much. Like, this is a sad image, so, what can you relate to sadness that'll like enhance that? Oh, they're standing under a bridge. It's a really tall bridge in the background.
Here's a quick one, but you can keep drawing.
Yeah,
Someone
yeah.
When can you expect an online class with Paul?
Well, you can hit me up privately, and we could skip the Josh Kyle middleman, and we can just handle all this between us. No,
yeah, that could happen too.
Josh, I would never betray you. I would never try to. I would never try to make money on the side for personal gain, because as everybody knows, teachers make a butt ton of money. You can live off that stuff for the rest of your life. No, I online classes, like, this is fun, but like, man, what I've really liked about Workshop Academy is just gathering in one place, and I get to see all your shining faces, and we get to talk, and we get to meet, and we get to know each other. I got to think about that a little while longer. I gotta figure out how we can make it meaningful for all of us, because it means a lot to me too.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I do like to run my mouth, as you've seen. This person has found some kind of little oyster or pearl in something.
Another question: when it comes to designing, what is good design to you, and how would you practice design? For example, like a tech design.
Okay, well, that's kind of like almost like an abstract question. You can give the engineer answer to that, the form follows function one. That's the tried and true. Or you could give the abstract one, which is that, reducing things to proportions and stuff. Here's a nugget that I go over in my class a lot. So here's the alphabet. All right, here's numbers. So my bullshit answer to your question is that we're taught to make these kinds of motions with our hands. Uniform, one over the other, one line on top of the other, stacked, grid formation. I really think that the true designers learn to write the alphabet like this. how, I mean, this is kind of janky, but see how letters are crossing over other letters? See how we're going from little tiny moves like this to this, running ourselves off the page here and there? What if we could move, like God moving over the face of the water? What if our lines didn't have to stack? What if they could travel, in and out of the canvas? To me, good design is just people who know how to move gracefully and make big, bold moves, and make kind of like, as we're saying here today, connected moves, rational, logical moves, in addition to things that look good in the abstract sense. There's a reason for everything to be there. There's the raison d'etre. So that's the short, condensed answer to that question.
So a couple people asked this is, how do you apply the meal to a concept art?
Oh, easy peasy. So no one's going to ask you for this. In fact, they might outright tell you to stop. But here's your model sheet from the front. Here's your model sheet from the back. Now, if you want to go for extra credit, start to play a little bit with that spacing, because now it almost looks like there's a space here, doesn't it? Huh, interesting. Now we can start to, everyone does that concept art shadow on the ground thing, shadow on the ground. Well, hey, that shadow can pick up other little things, can it? The surface that they're standing on can be banked, can't it? You can start to add little things in the background, can't you? No one's going to ask you for the spaceship, but, maybe give them both. That's just being kind of like dressy. Really, you could have your model sheet and then off to the side, do a big aspect kind of thing, like if you wanted to show some really cool detail of their.
I definitely see you do this a lot in your layouts for your character design.
Yeah, I do it for me. I do it because it's so damn boring to just go from one thing to the other. I need to give myself an escape plan. So I'm trying to create kind of like an interesting kind of like circular flow going on. Text, right? That's kind of like, here's my cool project name, Demon Lords of the Reservoir, or whatever. I made a logo for it. It's an IP. Please get in touch with me, Netflix. You can give him a little pet. His name is Zubo. He's an alien. He's also a bumblebee. And Zubo goes right there. And Zubo helps sell the scale. If we put Zubo over here, you can see that Zubo loves him. Oh, Zubo. Coming up with names for things actually helps too, because then you can get a little bit more attached. This is a lame guy though. He's a vampire. Next question. Ooh.
Is there a part 2 of this workshop? And what would it be about?
Oh, color, 100% color. I want to do a thing on color because guys, recently I've come to accept color into my life. Working on Fortnite has made me embrace color in ways I never thought possible, new and meaningful ways. And I just might be able to trick some better color out of you, those of you who are all probably way better at color than me. These are all little tidbits from classes that I could put into little nuggets. Because I don't know if I'll do character craft again. And if I do it again, I don't know that I'll do it in the same way.
Right. I think a lot of people actually are looking forward to if you teach a tech design class, like hard surface or whatever.
You know what would be fun? Tech and hard surface, man. You already have so many good guys for that. You have Heidoff. He's amazing.
Yeah, well, he's kind of MIA because he just had another kid.
Oh gosh, I see. So you thought you'd drag me in.
And we all looked at your stuff on Halo, so yeah. You're
I don't know.
grandfather of the new Halo design.
Don't say grandfather. That's so old. No, but I think what would be fun is like if we did like just informal hangout sessions where, because I took a lot of notes. If you look here, these are kind of like my notes, right? I wrote all this stuff down, and I went through a lot of trouble to sound really composed for you guys. But I don't have to do that. Things can just be, you know, like the wind, man. So if you guys want to just do hangouts where it's like Q&A and we just riff and we just approach this thing kind of organically, because I feel like if as soon as you say let's do like a hard surface tech thing, that's like 5 to 10 sessions I have to plan out. But if we just, hey, this week we're going to talk about this, and you know we'll work through stuff together, I think that could be fun.
Yeah, I mean something like this with just like 1 hour or two, you know, it works perfectly too. Here's another question: if you're working midway on a meal and you start having fun ideas that are not related to the one that you are doing, do you just let go of it, or do you move on to the next thing?
My iterative brain that has been cultivated from 2 decades of working in games does move on until I get to that like spicier one. Let's see if I can find an example of that. Oh, here's maybe something where, like, did anybody see that picture of that fucked up snail that can travel on lava? That went out on social media a lot. I was thinking about those lava traveling snails traveling over a desert, pulling a gigantic inverted pyramid on a bed of clouds with a little city on top. And that made me think of a related idea of like a guy in a little aeroplane surrounded by fish balloons leaving this city with a bunch of like eclipsed planets behind it. So I don't know, that was one thing kind of begets another. Like here, this is kind of a sleeping dragon with some dudes coming up on it. And I liked the idea, but I thought the composition was like, I can't really make a picture out of that. It's not landscape, it's not portrait, it's not anything. So I was just like, well, if I went full landscape, I'll like that better. But you know, like I said, creative brains are spastic and they fire all over the place, and they have the attention spans of gnats. So the trick is to get something that you're so stoked on, which has enough interesting elements for you to kind of keep you planted. Here's the king of the grasshopper people, apparently, leaving Grasshopper's castle in the sky. It sounds like the Rick and Morty interdimensional cable thing. So this is still kind of bizarre association, some sort of queen that summoned these guys that she's riding on, coming out of the sea, attacking these boating people. Big mermaid. I don't know. I probably didn't answer your question. Am I scatterbrained? Yes. Do I jump back and forth from one thing to another? Often. And if I can't, if there's a piece that I have to do and I can't jimmy it in, then yeah, it's like you have to be like, well, these things don't go together, and you have to just kind of, I guess I'll save it for the next one.
Biggest color revelation from the recent work? I think you were talking about color and stuff.
Yeah, well, it's so hard to explain that without just getting full on into it. But the creative trickery thing that I could piece together for next time, if y'all are interested, is an approach the color I call constructive color, and it is basically kind of stemming around the same idea of trying to make color meaningful to you and make color pull more weight in a design. You know, by leveraging kind of our memory of what color is and what it does.
Yeah, we can save the in-depth explanation for the next one.
Oh, here's
loses the thunder.
Here's Granny running from the dragon as her village is being burned down, and her pendulous breasts are rocking to and fro. And there's a cow back here that's getting away, and other little villagers. So the plate is kind of like big smog village. Main is probably the poor granny running away. Sides are like, the dragon. Garnish is the field. Garnish are the other little people.
Here's a question. Common mistakes or tropes that makes design weaker.
Well, I kind of hit on some of those design trope kind of things that kind of suck because they're a little too obvious. They're not we've seen them before kind
I
of
guess
thing.
what's the one that you always see that just gets on your nerve?
I mean, like there's just a lot of aggression happening in pieces. There's a lot of kind of confrontation, right? There's a lot of just
Yeah. Do you think
this.
that part of that is just the industry we work in? It's like video games and you're always shooting
Yeah,
people, killing people.
there's a lot of dude bro. Oh, by the way, this is my email, everybody. If you want to get in touch, and if you want to get in touch with Josh after this about how awesome this was, you can visit the workshopacademy.net. But if not, just drop me an email and we can chat, or find me on the Facebook. But I was going to try to find another example of kind of what I'm talking about here. Here's a great artist that I found recently who's not doing stereotypical stuff. I thought this was pretty mold breaking. It's an unexpected place to find a mermaid. It's not the sea. It's a little tiny bathtub. Um, there's all this great supporting detail. This girl's combing her hair. I think it's really easy to want to do a piece that's about conflict of some kind, or like it's going to depend on your personality. I like to go for the gag. I like to go um, I like to go for something that's going to like fire off some neurons in a way that I like. This piece I thought was interesting. Pardon the kind of like open crotch. She's still covered, but I thought this was kind of cool because this is sort of, if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of taken from Korean bridal tradition where Korean brides have this kind of face makeup, but she's obviously kind of like kitted out with all this tactical shit. She's got her makeup container. She's got, all these little cues. She's combing her hair. Looks like a little diary back here. A clip from a magazine from a gun. Without drawing the actual gun, we get that, it's got something to do with, infantry. She's got these kind of military boots. I was looking at this just for forever, looking at all the wonderful little things. And it's not just a lot of shit going on. There's a lot of meaningful things happening here. A lot of meaningful thematic things that, wouldn't have come natural to me, particularly me being a Westerner, This is a box art for a game I think is really not that great looking of a game, but the poster sure kicks ass. It has everything I've been talking about. It's got this wonderful mane. It's got this plate down here with all these little secondary things. It's got, even the text kind of counts as an element, but it's got that meal richness. I guess there's like conflict and war happening, which is kind of tropey, but what are some of the other tropes that you see all the time? I guess sexy girl, and I'm a fan of that, but it's kind of fun when people play with that a little bit more. At least she's got something else kind of going on. She's a musician.
Yeah.
People who are musicians will respond to that. They'll recognize all this, these pedals and, equipment and stuff. That's the vegetables of the piece. Somebody, that's not just something they pulled out of their ass. They had to look these things up.
So I think just one last question before we end the workshop.
Yeah, sure.
I think a lot of people tend to ask this is how do you stay constantly creative and avoid burnouts?
Whew. Well,
yeah, it might be personal, but yeah.
I don't want to ever really paint, employers in the bad light, but there is something about working, 8 to 10 hours a day on a thing, and then trying to kind of also carve out that little sanctuary for yourself. But I've taken to becoming a morning person. I make sure that I start the day on my terms, and I solve some little creative problem. I get a little creative win in, like here's just this was probably done some morning where I started maybe with this astronaut guy investigating this, the asteroid, and there's this little creature behind it that's hiding, and this maybe it's their mom or something creeping up, like he stumbled across like a, it's like a thing defending its children, and there's this, he's not just floating out there in space. He came from somewhere, so I hooked him to a spaceship. I put a little garnish in there. I had a nice little win. This piece doesn't have to become anything. It doesn't have to, go into my portfolio. But at that moment, it meant something to me, and it reminded me of just kind of like, wow, on a dime, I can be somewhere so different from where I'll have to be once I go into the office. I can solve all kinds of creative problems. Here's something kind of tropey, just a fight between lizards and a exploding volcano. So yeah, but it's nice to get that stuff out of your system. And burnout comes when you're kind of trying too hard, I feel like. And so if you've got some snacks in you, you can get them out if you need to. But what I'm tickled by, what I'm fascinated by recently is just the idea that, man, if I can think a couple dream levels deeper, I'll come out of it with something that is just so much more interesting. I'll go back to this. This is where you've seen me do pages of weird aliens and stuff, and they're all just kind of floating there. They don't really seem to have any kind of agenda. But man, like, I get so much more of a charge out of this simple addition. And I would really want that for all of you, as you're doing, your fun stuff and your professional stuff, to just kind of expand into that new territory, to give your brain that new mobility, because it's not based on something that you're not in sympathy with. We all have to eat. We all know what's nourishing and what's empty. And I like thinking of myself as somebody who can create nourishment for other people. I like imbuing my work with importance, even if it's not there, because these things are so quickly consumed and quickly forgotten. But these little wins are for me. They keep my spirit alive.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Just whenever I feel burnout and then I do just personal work, it makes me feel so much better.
And look, I mean, this is informal work. This is super, super informal. And I think what we're getting into in our various industries is there's a higher level of formality that's required for a lot of things. A lot of us have to. There's more that we're responsible for on the fidelity end. So it can be kind of like a lot, right? So sometimes I'm just like, well, how do I do a lot with a little? How do I do max damage in only a few strokes and get that little endorphin hit? How do I, because it can't be that you have to kill yourself to make something wonderful. That's not sustainable. And then as I was showing you guys, some of those things you can flesh out. Some of those things you can turn into pieces and elaborate on, at your leisure, and get them just the way that you want them. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was a great answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's it for the 1 hour talk.
Okay.
Sorry about the technical difficulty earlier on.
Not at all, Josh.
That was crazy.
Yeah, you guys you're so good to put these together. I think this is a time where we all need a little bit of extra stuff to put in our cookers, and I need the talking experience. We're all kind of going a little crazy. So yeah. please get in touch with me if you're not already. I'm on Facebook and I'm fairly chatty there. And definitely hit up workshopacademy.net to leave your feedback and participate in future workshops of this nature. So cool. You guys are awesome. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And we'll end the stream right now.
Okay, 1 second here. I'm gonna wave goodbye. Okay. You can see me waving goodbye now. Goodbye, everyone. Don't leave me. Come back. Bye-bye.
Bye.